Welcome into a week 6 edition of the Varsity podcast. Justin, Barney, Sponge Franklin. A little bit of a scattered week with a little hurricane, tropical storm floating through here, changed quite a bit of stuff. So come to you a day later, but talking about a week 5 and then also some games that happened on Wednesday night after just some shifting and stuff. Not going to be a full Friday night of football. Duval County is also already canceled games for this week. So we'll cover all that in a minute before we look ahead to what we have of this week. We'll look back and some games last week. We're going to talk about Sponge. Man, I think Nease was a wild one. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think I said in the pod last week that this could be upset special. Nease, could be a team that could give St. Augustine problems the way they had started the season. St. Augustine need to be on upset alert. And what's crazy is they were up big.
Yeah. 21-0 at halftime.
Couldn't put the finishing touches on them. Gave Nease life. Nease got back into it, made some big plays late in that second half, and pulled out the upset.
One of the last times, or next to last time they won was in 2018, I think 14-13. The time before that, Nease ended this years and years long district winning streak of St. Augustine. Very similar thing. They went to overtime and won in overtime 23-20, but it was very similar. St. Augustine was up in the second half of that game. I remember I'm listening to this. I'm driving back to the paper at the time, and then I hear the game had gone to overtime. What in the world? That's insane. So very similar thing to last week's game where Nease came and you thought they were left for dead for a little bit, and then boom, they come surging back, an interception return. Maddox Spencer really took over in that second half. I mean, Neil Harry has done unbelievable at quarterback. And just really everything is going right for Nease. And they gave up a lot of points in that game. St. Augustine gave up a lot of points. But Nease, they look like they are for real.
Definitely. They kind of came out of nowhere to start the season. We didn't really have much of an eye on them. We knew that, Collin Drafts has done a really good job out there, and they've been up and down. They've had really good teams, and they've had some bad teams. And, we were kind of wait and see, and they definitely have put themselves on the map, and they made a statement, obviously, by getting a big win like that. Coming back from 21-0, is nothing to, that's where you're like,
on the road against your biggest.
Nothing's going right, and then you finally start clicking, you get some things going, and then all of a sudden you get a little momentum. The big stop on the overtime, on the scramble play with Hewlett. And like I say, now the rest of the season's ahead of you. Let's go.
Yeah.
They've totally caught my eye. Like they're definitely a team that they obviously are going to probably continue to get better. They're starting to get some, they're starting to feel themselves probably, seeing what they can do, what they're capable of by beating one of the teams that, what did we talk about last week? A team that could probably maybe go for a state title.
Yeah.
So, now the thing is, don't get too ahead of yourself. Don't get too full of yourself. Take it one game at a time, that whole blinders approach. But right now they're playing some good ball. I know they got some big games down the line too, so they can't take anything lightly, and definitely have to, like I say, take it the one game approach.
Starting in this week, if the Buchholz game is still scheduled for Friday night, that's a huge one. Buchholz,
that's what
powerhouse.
They've had problems with them, obviously, in the past. But go get the win, man.
Yeah, it's very impressed with what Collin Drafts and that staff and the players have been able to execute on both sides of the ball. I mean, like the defense had really been clicking to begin the season. The 7 points Ponte Vedra, 7 points Creekside, and then you go out and you donut Fletcher 39-0. Remember, you lost the game to Ridge Community due to weather, and then you came out in 35-34. In that St. Augustine game was just remarkable. Credit to Collin Drafts and the Nease Panthers, who have done it on both sides of the ball. The St. Augustine worries me a little bit now. And I said the week before, their defense was causing me a little bit of concern when I moved them up to number one. It was an unsteady feeling almost moving them up to number one, because I just think they've got some holes in their game for whatever reason. I think not having Bam Lyons in the backfield hurts, and I think losing two of your best linebackers last year, Julian Quintero and Jake Lusk, has really contributed to a tougher than expected start for St. Augustine.
Right.
So be interesting to see what they have going forward. It's I thought they were unquestionably the number one team, co number one team with Mandarin, and it's just been tough.
I think, like you pointed out, like when you lose a guy like Lyons, who's like a tremendous bell cow, a guy you can always count on to get those tough yards. It takes pressure off your quarterback. It takes pressure off the passing game that you don't have to be so good at, throwing the ball down the field. Now they do it very well. They got obviously a good quarterback play, dynamic receivers, but that's like your main offense and that's your main focal point. So teams can say, you know what, we can kind of just play coverage. You can come after the quarterback. You can do different things when you don't have to like solely lock in on shutting their run game down anymore. And then on the flip side, defensively, when you lose two guys that were a major focal point of being like, force factors on that defense, now you're kind of not getting those stops when you need to get stops. Your defense is bending and breaking, so it's tough when you lose those guys like that on defense to where you're just not the same unit you were from the year before.
Yep.
So I think both of those key factors is what's like, yeah, those are concerning because the defense was doing enough, competition level was not as, big of who you played so far. We didn't get the Bowls game. But the way Bowls scores, that the game might have been a shootout too. So now it's looking like you're going to kind of be in these shootout type of games, maybe the rest of the year, which your offense is more than capable of doing that. But defense has definitely got to come along and figure out some stuff. They got to change some things up and figure out some stuff so they can get stops in these critical games, in the playoffs and on down the season. But offensively, they're fine, I think, but definitely, losing the running back to just kind of lean on, and then when your defense is struggling, you're struggling. So we'll see how the season progresses and see if they can get some stuff figured out on that end of the side of the ball. But I still like St. Augustine, but definitely now, you lose a game, now it throws a question mark on there. Let's see what they can do from moving forward.
I think it was a tough loss for St. Augustine. Again, they're not losing to a cream puff. They're losing to Nease, which has been one of the best teams around. Really conceivably could be the number one team in the area. And we'll get to our rankings in a minute. But, I think that showed a lot more about Nease in the middle of Nease and being able to answer the call. Now 21-0 on the road against maybe your second biggest rival behind Ponte Vedra. Excellent win for Nease to grow up on the road. Last Friday night, a few others from last week, we knew Mandarin was going to get beat by IMG Academy. They did pretty savagely, 49-6. I don't think you can penalize Mandarin too much for that. No. Had this game been played when Mandarin was at full strength, I think they could compete in that game. But you're down your top receiver. You're down your quarterback. You lost another guy to a leg injury. There have just been so many issues for Mandarin that have been out of their control. So you take that loss with a grain of salt. They were 18-13 game the week before against Bradford. With a freshman quarterback, you lose your top receiver in the second quarter. So I think you grade Mandarin a little bit. Yeah,
you kind of throw that one out for sure. Because especially, I would have still picked IMG with a fully loaded Mandarin still, just because it's it's IMG. But I would have loved to have seen how they could have competed in that game. That's what you want to see. That's why you play those games. You want to see how this team stack. How do we stack up against an all-star team?
Yep.
And yes, we have our studs. They've got a ton of Jamie Frenches and Carmel Jones on that IMG team. So how does this loss doesn't affect them? It's more so of they still got to figure out what they're going to do, continuing to get the quarterback play up to a better level. How do you replace the injuries on offense at your receiver spot? How to get the running game more involved. So they've got to figure all that stuff out just as the season goes. That was just a one-off game. That would have been great if everybody's playing. Move on and just wash it and let's go to the next game. That's basically the mentality they need to take and try to figure out those things that they're lacking in their guys that aren't playing. So, like I said, it's going to be tough for them. But the good part is you got 5 games to figure it out.
So. That's true, and I think they will figure it out. They just have not had the fortune, the benefit of having some of those injuries be spaced apart, and you can grow and learn from that. But a couple more from last week. I thought the Oakley Bowls game was exciting. Bowls 57, Oakley 50. That's 2 losses in a row for Oakley, just like Mandarin. But Bowls, to me, is another one like St. Augustine where you feel good about something you're doing. And then the defense last year was an issue. The defense this year has shown that it's going to be an issue. But on the flip side of that, week 1 against Range, you couldn't generate that offense. Yeah. Week 5 against Oakley, you found a way to generate that offense.
We know Bowls offense is highly capable. They've got great playmakers on the outside. Their run game's good. It was going to be a question of how good can Ethan Drum be, at the quarterback play. And obviously, after week one playing a tough Reigns defense, each week he's gotten better. Oakleaf, no knock to them too. They kind of came out of nowhere this year, and I'm impressed with them. Even in a loss, you take solace and you try to figure out things, no moral victories or whatever. But they didn't get beat like they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
To me, yes, they've lost 2 in a row, but they lost to 2 pretty good teams, and they're still highly competitive in those games. They just gotta obviously you can't let a team score 57 points on you.
Yeah,
so
that's
you got to figure some stuff out on defense. But then again, offensively, that's where Oakleaf has been good this year.
Mm-hmm.
Their quarterback play has been really good. Their running game's good, so they're obviously scoring points. Now figure it out on defense. Same for Bowles. Now that you've got some things clicking on offense, figure out that defense. You can't be in 57-50 shootouts every single week. It just can't happen. But you take the good with the bad and say, all right, well, offensively right now we're clicking. Let's just keep that going, and let's make some adjustments on defense and figure it out. And hopefully both of those teams. Like I said, I still feel like if those teams can play at that high level of offense and just figure it out on defense, they can be contenders as we move on down the season. Like I say, I'm highly impressed with the way Oakleaf started the season, even though they lost 2 in a row. But we'll see how they go in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, big for Oakleaf, and I think these next few weeks are pivotal coming up for them because I mentioned this on our Super 10 before and on here. This is kind of the part of the season last year where they broke down, and you were 2-0, and then you ended up finishing 3-6. So I think Oakleaf you played significantly better this year. I mean, you lost to Hawthorne 27-21, and you lose to Bowles 57-50. So you're playing much better competition and losing closer games. So if you can kind of prevent that slide from happening like it did last year, I think Oakleaf will be fine. Another one from last week, that was our game of the week. Trinity Christian 21, Columbia 14 was kind of a snoozer of a game until about the last 4 minutes of the game. And Trinity held them off and pick off in the end zone of that. I've never seen 2 onside kicks recovered in the span of about 30 seconds.
I think that last one was a little bit of a good call.
Early, I agree.
But again, you got to don't leave it up to the refs. What we always say, don't leave it up to the referees to interpretate anything. Because if they make a call, you're going to be the one crying at the end. We got screwed, and don't leave it up to that. Get on it, or make the play to where you're not getting penalties called on you. So yeah, I thought that Trinity came out it was kind of that first quarter was a little slow, back and forth defensive slugfest. Both teams trying to feel themselves out, and then hit a couple big pass plays. Trinity did, scored early, and then had the big pick six. It was like they scored in waves right there right before the half, and then it was up 21-0 big, and then it was like the whole third quarter was just back and forth defense, punt. And then Columbia finally got on the board with a big touchdown. Then got those back-to-back onside kicks. You're like, whoa!
It was. I was texting Verlin Dormady and saying, I bet that last 4 minutes of the game probably took about 5 years of your life because it was so chaotic. Trinity goes from basically you could almost take knees in the game had you got the ball back, and then Columbia sticks one of the touchdown, onside kick, another touchdown, onside kick, you cover it, and then boom, they've got the ball with 20 seconds to go.
Playing defense, it got hairy for sure. I was like, because in that fourth quarter, Lake City they were connecting on pass plays, blown coverages. Man. Guys, I'm like, what? What are we doing? Guys were running wide open. It was, so for a minute there, I was like, they're not going to stop them. And they got all the way down inside the, almost the 10-yard line, and then got the big interception in the end zone. But yeah, I think Lake City, obviously they lost last night too. They played St. Augustine, so St. Augustine got back on the winning side. But good win for Trinity to kind of get some things. Like I say, we talked about it already, how young they are. I think they're kind of what was good was they threw the ball way better than they have all season. So take that, continue to get that. It's crazy. I think you and Cole said on the broadcast, just not seeing the Trayon Webbs, the Darnell Rogers, that running back,
right?
Even going back to when we were there with the Bowie brothers and Rashid, all those guys, they've always had some sort of dynamic runner. Now I think they've got some really good young backs. They just are young.
To me, a lot of the
8th and 9th graders, man.
A lot of the impressive thing to me the other night was the Trinity pass catchers, and Hicks had 4 or 5 guys he threw to. There was just a lot of guys that were contributing, catching the ball. Was it Trey that picked off the pass? So he had the pick six. He had 5 or 6 catches in the game. So a lot of those young sophomore receivers were growing up, and I think they really grew up late in that Trinity Columbia game last week. So I thought that was a good one. And our good game of the week streak continues after last week. And I'm thinking, man, Cole, this is a snoozer. And then boom, bang, bang, bang. We got a game that goes down to the wire. So that was a good way last week. Another one from last week, Beachside 41, Bishop Kenny 8. I thought that was a telling sign of how strong that Barracuda's passing offense can be when they get going. And to me, my knock on Beachside has been they've played nobody going into this year, the first year in district play. And yeah, you entered on a 9-game winning streak. You won your first 2. Yes, the potential was there, but when you're beating the prominences, the OCPs, those kind of guys, you're not going to get any respect. And this year they've had to do that. And I've seen this before as new teams are kind of getting built and established. You take an independent path, that's fine, but don't kind of beat your chest and say, "Hey, look at us now." You hadn't beaten anybody, and that was my gripe to Beachside. And to be fair, they have answered that. That Bishop Kenny game showed me quite a bit. I mean, Bishop Kenny was in that dogfight against Bowles, and
they had Bowles.
And Beachside goes to Bishop Kenny and just lays
wasn't even a game.
The thump on him. So very impressed by Beachside. Passing forward by Eddie Jordan doing well, and Pete Duffy's guys are doing really good. That brings us to our Super 10 this week, and I'm not going to include the Bartram loss that Sponge referenced. They lost last night to Coy Creek 46-26. So this was before that game. So I had Bartram staying in at 10. I had Beachside back up in the rankings at 9. Baker County 8. Ponte Vedra 7. I'm sorry, Mandarin 7. Ponte Vedra 6. Bowles 5. St. Augustine 4. Nease 3. Bradford 2. Rains 1.
Oakley out of your top 10 now?
Yeah, Oakley's out of my top 10.
Still hard, man. Still getting love, man. Still getting love. Yeah, so you got Bradford 2.
Bradford 2.
All right. So I bumped the Nease boys all the way around.
It makes sense.
So I've got Rains obviously at number 1. They're the clear cut number 1 after you have St. Augustine and Mandarin go down this year. Bradford obviously would be a good choice to maybe be number 1, but Rains is definitely number 1. Bradford's obviously year 2, but I gave Nease a lot of credit in that game, and I go off basically if Nease and Bradford were going to play this Friday night, who would I pick? I probably would pick Nease just because I think they're playing better. I think again, the knock always on Bradford is offensively, what can they do? So
you have Nease. You have Nease at 1?
No, I have Nease at 2. Rains at 1. Rains is definitely clear cut number 1 now that St. Augustine and Mandarin both lost. So that's the only difference we have. And I got Bradford at 3, St. Aug 4, Bowles 5. I kept Oakleaf at 6 just because I'm still impressed with what they're doing. Now they could lose some more, and then I'll drop them out of there. But I'll keep them right now just because they could have, would have, should have won that Bowles game, but they didn't. And I got Ponte Vedra, Mandarin. I still got Riverside at 9 and Baker County at 10.
Okay, a little bit of variation, And had I seen what was going to happen on Wednesday night, I would have kept Oakleaf in and kicked Bartram out. So and as we shift into this week, so it's going to be kind of a weird week. We had a few games on Wednesday night of week 6. St. Augustine 27, Columbia 6. That was a big one. Beachside 41, Menendez 3. I'm sorry, was it?
No, that's right.
Beachside 41, Menendez 3.
Yeah.
Ponte Vedra not playing this week. That was a little bit of a disappointment there. So their game is Fleming Island. They're supposed to play Fleming Island Friday, so we'll see if that actually holds out and the weather cooperates. So Ponte Vedra not play. Beachside 1, of course. And they just continue to win. And then the big one to me, to Coy Creek 46, Bartram Trail 26, and which is a surprise to me because Coy struggled to beat Westside, struggled to beat First Coast, and then you go out and you beat Bartram by 20. And Arthur Lewis,
he scored 40 on him.
Yeah, Arthur Lewis had a late touchdown to make that game even closer. Yeah. So that game was lopsided.
Yeah, I was very surprised when I saw the early score for that one. I'm like, what is going on?
Unbelievable. Really unbelievable.
Yeah, my nephew is a 9th grader at Coy Creek, and he went to that game last night. Before he went, I was like, y'all guys are gonna get blazed.
Yeah, and I thought, and
I was like, whoa.
That's credit to Zach Harbison because that's Coy Creek's, to me, their biggest win that they've had in program history. When you're coming in as a new school in St. Johns County, I remember I had this talk with Mike Lloyd back when he was at Ponte Vedra. I had this talk with Greg Stant when he was at Creekside, and it wasn't too long after Ponte Vedra opened that they beat Nease.
Yeah.
And kind of beating Big Brother is huge. And it took Creekside a little bit of time. I think they beat Bartram for the first time 7 years after they opened. So it took a little bit more time for them to get that big win over quote unquote Big Brother. So Coy Creek is in year 4.
Yeah.
And it hasn't really had that. You beat Menendez. Okay, that's not really Menendez. When you think of Blue Bloods in St. Johns County, it's not quite there. But when you beat kind of the man in a sense, it's huge. It's huge.
They've been kind of king out there, along with like Nease. Creekside's still kind of considered that little brother. But yeah, that's for a brand new program 4 years in. Both Decoy and Beachside making a little bit of waves out there now.
Yeah.
So, a lot of those kids, who were going to Nease are now going to Decoy.
Yep.
That's kind of like that major little area right there on IGP, where Decoy is at is, those guys, all those kids were going all the way over to Nease. And that's like, that's far in a sense, so now those kids are, staying over there, so they've obviously been building up. And like I said, you get a big win against Bartram. Like I was shocked.
Big time. So Bartram will be moving out of my Super 10. And I think it's going to be tough for Bartram, which has been consistently in the playoffs since it opened, with the exception of a couple of years. They're possibly going to miss the playoffs. I don't see an easy path for Bartram now to getting into the playoffs, because you're probably not going to beat Nease. You still got St. Augustine on that schedule. I think you got Mandarin as well. No, I don't think you have.
You got Buchholz still.
Buchholz. So you got some heavyweights on that. I think Rebalt's the only really kind of gimme.
Rebalt's the last game. Yeah.
On that schedule. So Bartram,
they only have 4 left because they played 3
and 3. Yeah. So Bartram is got a tough road ahead to make the playoffs, and that to me, for a team that started in my top 5 or 6, that's pretty crazy to think that they're going to be potentially bowing out.
Yeah, like I said before, it's almost like, man, is Bartram like out of the running before October 1st?
It could be. Yeah,
it's like they got a tough road to hoe. Obviously you get to compete against these big time teams to make a statement. You had the big win at Ware County, which we thought was big. One of the teams that's been really good in Georgia. Get back to that game. Obviously it was another shootout. It's like they're kind of like, I guess that's the theme of the season, man. Where is the defense is at, man? Rains is lock stocked on defense. They're the best defense in the area with Bradford, but everybody else, offensive numbers look good.
Yep.
But again, you don't want to put yourself in shootout games every week,
right?
Because if you do that, then you got to be perfect. If you're just going match for match, score for score, eventually, somebody's going to screw up.
Well, you look at last year with the St. Augustine Mainland game.
Right.
I mean, how good was St. Augustine just churn, and then you run into a defense that hits you in the mouth a little bit.
Slow you down and stop. Yeah. Exactly. So you're going to face that you're going to play some good defenses when you get on into the playoffs. Like these teams, like that's you can't just have a high flying offense and win a state title. That very rarely happens. You got to have both. Usually one unit might be a little better than the other, but you got to have a little bit of both. You just have to.
Got to. And you don't have to look too far. I mentioned that St. Augustine. I mean, St. Augustine was high flying last year, and you get into the game. I think Carl Jenkins maybe had a kickoff return for a touchdown in that game. So you really didn't even have that full assembly of I think they had 19 points. So,
when you're averaging about 40 and
you go and you kind of hit that wall. So you got to have a little bit of that defense too. And some teams have really struggled to have that. So we don't have a full varsity look at week 6 this week because our games are kind of scrambled all over the place. We still are up in the air on our Friday nights. So we'll talk a little bit, we'll recap all of kind of this week and what happened this week in the next edition of Varsity. But we want to talk just briefly, kind of topic wise, handing out the most impressive, least impressive teams of the season, or most surprising teams of the season, the most surprising on the good side and the bad side. Yeah. So Sponge, I'll throw that to. Well, I can start if you want to go next.
Go ahead. Good. I'm sure we're gonna have 2 of the. We might have 2 of the same because they're in our top 10 now and they kind of come out of nowhere. But go ahead.
So to me, I think Nease is the biggest surprise.
Definitely.
Surprise team.
Agreed.
And they've had a good team. Collin Drafts has built something at Nease, and when I go back to building the infrastructure of a program that can sustain itself through the ebbs and flows of the 4 and 5 stars. You're not going to have those guys every year.
Yeah.
Not going to have those guys every year. A few years ago, Nease had a really good senior heavy team. Marcus Stokes was the junior. Bogle's on that team. They had a lot of good guys. The receiver was our player of the year, Dom Henry. You had a lot of good guys on that team. They built towards that. I mean, they didn't just all pop on the scene that year. These guys, Nease guys, had built. They had taken their lumps. They had gotten beat savagely as freshmen and sophomores. They got to their senior year, and boom, they put it all together. That Nease team reminds me a lot of this one because these guys, there's a lot of seniors on this Nease team. You don't have an influx of transfers and stuff. You weren't taking the savage beatings. I mean, these seniors were actually pretty solid all their time at Nease, but you weren't elite. And I think you have built that, and it just reminds me so much of that team that went to the regional finals and lost to Buchholz when Marks was a junior, Dom Henry was a senior. And I think Nease, to me, has been the most surprising, positive team this year.
Yeah, I'm totally. That's who my number one surprise team. We said it earlier when they, not even just beating St. Augustine last week. They kind of just each week have like put numbers on people.
Yep.
Going all the way back to week 1, and then kind of some of the teams they have beaten, like a Ponte Vedra, who we respect as like one of the top teams in the area, top 10 team. They handled them with ease, no problem. They waxed C4's team, Fletcher, who we think obviously that's their one loss, and they seem like a pretty decent, Duval County team. So
when a loss, it was a thrashing, 39-0.
39-0. You're putting a shutout on
Unreal.
They so not only defensively have they, done well. We talked about the defense, but then offensively, obviously we know Harry's been great at quarterback. We know what Spencer can be at receiver. He's one of the top receivers. I mean, last year he had like 1,400 yards, I think.
He was really good
with a ton of touchdowns. So, they're putting everything together on both sides of the ball. Like we just said, one side's not better than the other. And then when you go and you can rally on a 21-point down and beat a team like St. Augustine, who we think is a state title, state championship contender, like that's big time. So like you learned a lot from your team by, getting a big win like that. And like I said before, don't get too like caught up. Like now you're the team to beat. Now you don't have to worry about anything. Now you take that win and you build on it to say, okay, because like I said, you got a big one in Buchholz if they're going to play Friday. To where a team that this is not your typical Buchholz team, but now you get on a little roll and you beat some of these teams that have been some of the powers the last couple of seasons that has kind of given people problems. So definitely by far they've got it clicking, they've got it going. I didn't see it coming, so like I say, they definitely are, definitely my surprise pick. Like I said, the other one would be, I guess, Oakleaf, because we knew what Raines was going to do. We knew, we knew Bradford was going to be good. Oakleaf, when I think I told you they played in that scrimmage classic with Trinity, and I was watching that film and I'm like, is Trinity not good or is Oakleaf good? Like, because that's where I'm like trying to gauge where I didn't know how good Trinity was going to be because I knew they were young. But watching that film on Oakleaf, I'm like, dang, they got some dudes. And I was like, they surprised me watching that. And then, I just kind of didn't think anything of it because again, that's like 2 weeks before the season even started, before the even kickoff classic games and all that. And then when they went week 1, you're thinking Riverside, the team that we were like in love with, they put a number on them. So now you're like, okay. So then they won a couple weeks. Yeah, it would have been nice to get that Hawthorne win on the road. You lose by a touchdown. Yes, last week you had a great opportunity. You were up late in the back and forth game against Bowles. You end up coming up short. So now the question is, are you going to fade like you did last year? Or are you going to take these 2 losses and say, okay, what do we need to do to get those losses into wins? What do we need to do to correct what we're not doing and win the rest of these games to get in the playoffs and maybe make a run? So they're on that verge of we're going to see what's going to happen with them. They might fade, and then I'll be like, well, same old Oakleaf. Or they might be, surprised, like, hey, I'm circling you out as a surprise. Now show me that, why you're a surprise pick that kind of came out of nowhere too, So who was your other surprise team?
Yeah, I think it's tough.
Before you would say like surprise, like as in like who turned out not to be so hot, I guess.
Yeah, and probably my surprise for the not as hot would probably be Bartram. I mean, you started and you knew there was going to be a drop off. You knew going from Lathan Biddle to Arthur Lewis, and did bring back a lot of the offensive linemen. But I think You lose to Ponte Vedra, you lose to Creekside, and then you lose against Coy Creek. I think that's a little bit of a surprise. You lost 3 county games already when you used to own kind of that block.
You would never lose.
So a little bit of a surprise to me for the struggles as Bartram. And they can still make the playoffs. You can finish 7-3, but I just think the surprise, they were a top 5 team for me, and you've kind of ebbed a little bit backwards. So there's so many other good surprise kind of teams. I think Beachside is another good one.
Beachside definitely is a good one.
And I think Mandarin is probably a surprise for me for the struggles that they've endured, and not necessarily on the field.
Due to injury, probably.
Yeah, not necessarily ill production or whatever. So I think Toby Bullock and the staff now are more so trying to you get what you can. Yeah, you lost 2 games, so that's not the end of the world.
It sucks so bad because there was such high expectation. Like, I remember media day, man, like talking to Jamie and Drake and all those guys literally before they went on with you and on Alessandro. Is like, I was like, it's a state championship or bust now, boys. And they're like, heck yeah, like this is it. We're going, we're doing it. And that's literally week 0 of the season. And then, you're playing, you're flying high, you're shutting teams out, you're blowing people out. Then all of a sudden, boom, your quarterback gets hurt. He's out for the year. Then your star receiver, gets hurt. He's out for however long. We don't know. He's got a dislocated finger. Then you lose, a receiver last week against IMG, another receiver. You're replacing some of those guys you lost, those backs, man. Like, you think about like Weish and how good he was last year for them. They've got some other good backs, but they're just not those same guys. Defensively, they lost some guys. Obviously, that back end, there's some of those corners. You obviously got Drake back there, controlling the safety in the secondary. But those expectations now have just completely shifted. Yeah. And it's just like, you don't want to be like, your season's over, you guys lost, it's over and done with, because you want to see them compete and go play. But there's just so much, like, it's like the balloon let out. Yeah. And it's just like, like the state championship or bust is like, it's like that seems so far away.
I know, and it's unfortunate because it's not underachieving by any means.
No, it's not.
It's when you lose an Elite 11 quarterback, 5-star receiver.
Injuries happen in sports, all sports, and it's always next man up mentality and stuff. But it's different. In high school, you don't have a 4-star quarterback as your backup. Right. You don't have another elite receiver that you've recruited for the last 3 years. It's a 9th grader. Yeah. Who's like, now granted he's one of the best, but then it's another 10th grader who we don't know about. Right. You just don't have the layers, even in the NFL. You've got another NFL caliber backup coming in, to back you up when, a Tyson Campbell goes down. So it's just it's nothing to do with what, they controlled. So it just sucks that they're in that position right now.
Yeah, unfortunate for the guys on that Manor team, Toby Bullock and the staff. Nobody's going to feel sorry for him, of course, but it's just unfortunate. I feel bad for high school is such a short period of time. I was at a media day this week and asked athletes, high school, how do you want to make an impact in your short period of time? Because high school is such a small window of life,
Quick, man.
And Terrell Jones, unfortunately, out for the year, and Jamie banged up and stuff. So you just hate to see that because it's not like the NFL where you got a 5-year contract. You come back. This is your last season in high school. And it was an unfortunate part of the game, but it is what it is. And that'll wrap us up for a Week 6 Hurricane edition of the Varsity 4 podcast. We're still planning on our game of the week Friday between between Middleburg and Orange Park. Hopefully that game will go off. Middleburg is off to its best start since 1989. Great job by Ryan Wolf and the Broncos, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So we'll see if that one goes off, but that is our Week 6 game of the week. That is streaming on news4jax.com, News4Jax Plus, and the News4Jax app. If that game happens, it'll be 7 o'clock Friday night. You can catch it on the stream. But Sponge and I will be back hopefully next week if we're not blown off the map in this storm with some more high school football talk and New Super 10. Thanks for joining us for Varsity 4 podcast.